My husband put a hidden camera in our home, so I gave him a show he'd never forget. The day I realized my home wasn't mine anymore. I'm Olivia Hart, 33, digital illustrator, loyal to a fault, and once hopelessly in love with a man named Colin. He was charming, brilliant, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order and kissed your forehead in traffic. But even the brightest smiles can hide the darkest shadows. And I didn't see the storm coming until it had already torn through the walls of my life. If you're wondering how this nightmare began, let me take you back to where it started. But before that, make sure to like my video and subscribe to my channel. It was a Tuesday. Funny how betrayal never waits for a dramatic backdrop. I'd just come home from the farmer's market, arms full of sunflowers and fresh peaches, the kind of soft day you don't expect to shatter. As I unpacked the groceries, I felt this strange itch, not physical, emotional, like something invisible was breathing down my neck. I brushed it off, blamed it on stress. But that night, while I was sketching in my studio, I noticed something, a blinking red light. It was tucked behind the bookshelf, subtle, nearly invisible, except to someone trained to notice detail like I am. At first, I thought it was some old router, a smoke detector, anything but what it truly was. But the moment I leaned in, a cold chill rippled down my spine. It wasn't just a light, it was a camera, a tiny wireless lens watching everything I did, everything I said, in the one place I thought was safe. I didn't scream, I didn't cry. I just stood there, frozen in the quiet, like a deer staring down headlights made of betrayal. My mind spun. Who put it there? Why? Was someone watching right now? That's when the terrifying truth punched through the fog. Only one person had access to that corner of the house. Only one person had helped me arrange the furniture for a better angle. His words, not mine. My husband, Colin. He was out of town for a supposed architecture conference in Denver, but suddenly every business trip, every last-minute flight, every password change made my stomach turn. This wasn't just surveillance, it was control. It was silence disguised as protection. And worse, it was deliberate. Cameras don't install themselves. I spent that night walking through every room, scanning for tiny red lies blinking at me from the shadows. I found 3 more, one in the bedroom, one in the kitchen, one, horrifyingly, in the bathroom. I felt violated, stripped, like my life had been turned inside out for someone else's sick satisfaction. I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor and stared at my wedding ring, that golden noose now burning against my skin. The next morning, I didn't call him. I didn't confront. I became someone else, quieter, smarter, colder. I started writing everything down, dates, camera locations, patterns in his behavior. If he wanted to spy on me, I'd give him a performance he'd never forget. I'd play the loyal wife, the clueless beauty in distress, but behind every smile, I was sharpening my script for revenge. That week, I took one of the cameras and rewired it, turned the feed back on him. I watched from my laptop as Colin returned from his trip. He walked into the house like nothing had changed. He poured himself a drink. He sat on the couch, texting someone with a grin I hadn't seen in months. That was the night I heard him say her name, Tessa, the woman from his office, the one I'd asked about before. Just a coworker, he'd said. That coworker had just sent him a photo I can never unsee. I realized then this wasn't about safety. It wasn't even about obsession. It was about control, manipulation. He needed to own every part of me, even when he wasn't home. And worst of all, he thought I was too blind to see it, too soft, too trusting. He forgot I was an artist, someone who could read between the lines, see through color, light, and shadow. And now I saw him clearly. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments and hit that like and subscribe button to join me through this wild journey of betrayal and unexpected triumph. I spent the next few days recording my own messages, not for him, for me. Messages where I pretended to confess things I hadn't done, affairs that never happened, secrets I never kept. I fed him lies, let him soak in his own paranoia. Every time he watched, I wanted him to wonder if the puppet had cut her strings. And then I smiled directly into the lens and whispered, "I hope you're enjoying the show," because the real show was just getting started. I wanted to believe it was just a dream, a misfire in Ethan's mind maybe, stress, fatigue. But the name Sophia clung to my brain like smoke after a fire. No matter how many times I shook it off, it clung to my senses. Every kiss felt slightly colder. Every "I love you" rang slightly hollower. And then I started noticing things, subtle, almost invisible signs, like shadow, in broad daylight. Ethan was always careful, meticulous even, but secrets have a way of slipping through even the smallest of cracks. I wasn't actively snooping, at least not at first, but sometimes fate lays the evidence at your feet like breadcrumbs daring you to follow. It began one Saturday afternoon. Ethan said he had a client meeting in the city. Normally, I wouldn't question him. He was an architect and his work did keep him busy. But this time, something didn't sit right. His cologne was heavier. He changed shirts 3 times. When I asked him what firm the client was with, he stumbled, then answered too quickly. That moment scratched at my mind like a needle on vinyl. I walked him out, waved goodbye, and then I went back inside and stared at the front door for what felt like an eternity. The silence of the house swallowed me whole. I tried to distract myself. I folded laundry, watered the plants, even attempted to finish the report due Monday. But when I passed by his office, something told me to look. His briefcase was still there. I opened the drawer slowly, hands trembling. There, buried under a sketch pad and some client folders, was a crumpled hotel receipt. The date? Last weekend, when he'd told me he was in Chicago for a conference. But this hotel was in Riverview, just 2 hours away. My stomach dropped. My fingers tingled as if they'd touched a live wire. It couldn't be, right? I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not even Daniel. I needed more. I needed certainty. That evening, when Ethan came home, he was sweet, overly sweet. He brought home my favorite sushi, poured me wine, rubbed my shoulders. It would have worked on me once. But now every smile felt like a lie sealed in cellophane. I smiled back, played my part. But something inside me had shifted. Trust was no longer automatic. It had to be earned. And he wasn't earning anything anymore. 2 days later, I went to put groceries in Ethan's car and spotted something beneath the passenger seat. I reached in and pulled it out. A small blue action figure, a superhero, scratched, worn, clearly loved. I turned it over in my hand, my breath catching in my throat. We had no kids, no nieces, no nephews. Where did this come from? I felt like I'd touched a ghost. My heart raced as I placed it gently back and closed the door. A toy in his car, a hotel receipt, a name in his sleep. These weren't just red flags. They were sirens. I still hadn't said a word. My silence became my shield, my eyes sharper, my ears trained for lies. That same week, I checked our joint account and saw 3 identical charges. Same hotel, same location, 3 different weekends. My fingers went numb. The math was beginning to do itself. I wasn't losing my mind. I was catching his. That night, I sat in bed, Ethan beside me scrolling his phone. I pretended to sleep, my back to him, watching the flickering shadows on the wall. Suddenly, his phone lit up. A voicemail. I wasn't trying to pry, but when a child's voice echoed through the air saying, "Night, Daddy, love you," I stopped breathing. I closed my eyes tight, trying to force tears back into their cave. That voice wasn't a mistake. That voice was truth. Soft, young, full of innocence. And it didn't belong to any child I knew. Ethan didn't even flinch. He just deleted it, rolled over, and fell asleep. I lay there in the dark, heart pounding, tears slipping quietly onto my pillow. The betrayal wasn't just a possibility now. It was alive, breathing beside me. I had become a ghost in my own marriage. The life I thought I knew was a carefully constructed illusion, and I was the audience, applauding a magician who never deserved the stage. I didn't sleep that night. I watched him. listened to his breathing, and inside, a fire was growing. Not rage. No, that would be too easy. It was something colder, more calculated. I wasn't going to scream or throw things. I wasn't going to beg for explanations. I was going to find the truth, cradle it in my hands, and let it carve out the path to my revenge. And so began my journey, quiet, measured, and dangerous. The breadcrumbs were no longer scattered. They were a trail, and I was ready to follow it wherever it led, even if it shattered me along the way, because something told me the real heartbreak hadn't even started. I wasn't just looking for answers anymore. I was chasing a ghost I couldn't unsee. That voicemail of a boy calling Ethan Daddy didn't just pierce me, it split my reality in two. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. My chest felt like it was carrying someone else's heartbeat, someone else's agony, and no matter how many times I replayed that voicemail, I couldn't make it make sense. I had to see it. I had to see them, so I drove. 3 hours city to city, watching the trees blur into smudged lines like the truth I was chasing. I used the address from one of Ethan's hidden credit card statements, one I'd found tucked in a jacket pocket he thought I'd never touch. I called in a sick day at work, but the only sickness I carried was betrayal. I'd packed a trench coat, a pair of oversized sunglasses, and my old college ID badge, because the lie I was about to live needed some kind of disguise. The neighborhood was painfully normal. Rows of townhouses, flower beds in full bloom, a swing set gently rocking in someone's yard like the world hadn't fallen apart. I parked 2 houses down, heart thudding like war drums, and then I saw her. She stepped out with her son, Noah, I would later learn, carrying a Spider-Man lunchbox and wearing the kind of calm I hadn't felt in months. She was beautiful. Not threatening beautiful, but soft and warm, the kind of woman you trust instantly. Her laughter, even from across the street, made my stomach twist, not out of jealousy, out of heartbreak. I followed from a distance, staying out of sight, hands trembling on the steering wheel. When they left, I did something I thought I'd never do. I walked up to the door and knocked. No plan, just madness. The door creaked open a few seconds later. A woman, older, peeked out. Her mother, maybe? I smiled politely, using the fake name I'd rehearsed in the car. Hi, I'm with a local interior design firm. We're scouting homes for a community spotlight project. May I take a quick look at your entry layout? The lie tasted sour in my mouth, but it worked. She let me in. I only needed a moment. One glance at the photos on the wall, and there he was, Ethan. His arm around Sophia, a younger Noah on his lap, a fireplace flickering in the background like the scene was ripped out of some greeting card, only it was a nightmare in disguise. I kept my composure somehow. I thanked her, gave her a fake business card I'd printed the night before, and left. But when I got back to the car, I shattered. I screamed. Into the steering wheel, into the sky, into the silence that had wrapped around me for weeks and now threatened to swallow me whole. Ethan had a whole other life. A child, a woman who looked at him like he hung the stars. He didn't just cheat. He built a second kingdom while burning mine down in slow motion. And the worst part? They didn't know either. Sophia wasn't the villain. She was just as deceived. And Noah, was innocent in all of this. I cried harder than I ever had, not just for me, for her, for the child, for the years Ethan stole from all of us. I thought I'd hit rock bottom before, but this was the other side of the mirror, where every reflection was warped and nothing was what it seemed. I drove away that day not as a wife desperate to fix her marriage, but as a woman reborn in fire. I wouldn't confront him, not yet. No, I'd take my time. I'd learn the full truth, stitch by stitch, until the web he spun collapsed around him like an avalanche. That night, I called Daniel. I told him everything. His silence on the other end wasn't cold. It was furious, controlled, calculating. "You ready for the next step?" he asked. And I was, because if there's one thing a woman like me learns after betrayal, it's this: silence is no longer a wound, it's a weapon. And I was going to use mine with precision. The quiet storm, where silence becomes strategy and heartbreak sharpens into a weapon. I didn't scream. I didn't hurl plates or send threatening texts. That's what Colin expected, a dramatic meltdown, a soap opera spiral. But instead, I moved with the grace of a woman scorned too deeply to make noise. Silence, I've learned, is not weakness. It's warning. It's the air just before the thunder, and I was about to become the storm. I called Daniel that night, my best friend, my tether to truth when my world spins off axis. He answered before the first ring finished. "Lisa," he said, instantly alert. I hadn't even realized I was crying until my voice cracked. "I need a lawyer, not a friend. Not yet." The way he exhaled told me everything. He knew this day would come. Maybe he'd even feared it before I did. We met in his office the next morning, quiet, sunless, and early, before the city had time to stir. I laid it all out like evidence at a trial. The second apartment, the child, the surveillance, the lies stacked like dominoes behind our every shared moment. Daniel's hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightened, but he didn't offer pity, just action. "Okay," he said, "here's what we're going to do." That's when Lisa Delaney stopped being the loyal wife. I became the strategist. We started with financial records. I pulled every password Colin had carelessly stored on our shared Google Drive, masked as house plans and project budgets. I logged into banks, crypto wallets, offshore transfers. The man was a magician, a charming thief. Money from our joint account was being bled out in microtransactions to fund his other life. Rent for the second unit, private schooling for the child, boutique gifts I never received. Next came the cameras. Daniel handed me 2 pens that were really audio recorders and a lipstick tube that doubled as a wide lens spy cam. "Record everything," he said. "Every conversation, every lie. Make him build the gallows with his own words." So I did. I played the perfect wife, made his favorite meals, asked him about work, laughed at stories I now knew were rehearsed lies. Every hug became a hunt, every kiss a clue. I memorized his schedule, tracked his location history. The beauty of betrayal is that once the mask falls, you begin to see patterns where there used to be only trust. And Lillian? His mother? The queen of denial? I paid her a visit, brought flowers, sat through her condescending jabs about how Colin worked so hard to keep this marriage alive. Then I dropped a single name, Haley. Her face cracked like porcelain. She knew. She'd always known. That night, I wrote her off like expired medicine, once needed, now dangerous. But the one thing I couldn't plan for was the ache. The ache of looking at our wedding photo and realizing it was theater, of remembering every "I love you" that now tasted like ash, of knowing I had given years of my life to a man who treated my love like wallpaper, decorative, replaceable, unnoticed. So I channeled that pain into folders, timelines, voice memos, screenshots. I built a case so airtight it could suffocate, and through it all, Daniel stayed beside me, quietly fierce. When he looked at me now, I saw something more than sympathy. It was admiration, maybe even love. But I couldn't go there. Not yet. My heart was still under reconstruction. I had one final step. I wrote invitations, elegant white cards, embossed lettering, one addressed to Colin, another to Haley. Same date, same restaurant, different reasons. I told Haley it was a chance to meet and talk, woman to woman. I told Colin it was a work dinner with a potential investor. What he didn't know was that I had just invested every ounce of my heartbreak into setting the perfect trap. Because storms don't shout, they arrive quietly, and then they change everything. The quiet storm explodes into the roar of truth, and everything shatters in one unforgettable night. The night I planned felt like walking a tightrope over a canyon with no safety net beneath me. My heart was a war drum pounding loud enough to drown out every fear whispering in the shadows. I had rehearsed every word, every glance, every breath I'd take before the evening began, but nothing could prepare me for the moment Ethan walked through that restaurant door, blissfully unaware that his carefully constructed world was about to collapse in front of him. I wasn't just bringing my pain to the table. I was bringing Sophia, the other woman who thought she was just meeting a business acquaintance. But tonight, the truth had an appointment, and we were both there to keep it. When Ethan saw me, his smile was polite but cautious, like a cat sensing a trap. And then, when Sophia arrived, her presence quiet but radiant, he froze. That's when I saw the cracks in his armor begin to spiderweb across his perfect facade. We sat at opposite ends of the long, polished table, the tension between us as thick as the candlelight flickering between wine glasses. I could feel Sophia's eyes on me, full of confusion, hurt, and something I recognized: betrayal. But her pain wasn't mine to own tonight. Tonight, I was the woman who had been silenced for too long. I watched Ethan as he struggled to juggle the two worlds he thought he could keep separate, his eyes darting, his voice losing strength as I unfolded the story piece by piece. I told them about the hotel receipts, the secret bank transfers, the hidden phone calls, facts that hit harder than any scream could. Sophia's face went from disbelief to devastation in seconds. She looked at Ethan like he was a stranger who had stolen her whole life under the guise of love. And in that moment, I realized she was as much a victim as I had been. A quiet war had been waged on both our hearts, but tonight the battlefield was laid bare. Ethan tried to speak, to spin the lies into half-truths, but the room swallowed his words. His charm, once his greatest weapon, was now useless against the sharp edge of truth. The confident man who had manipulated two women into silence was reduced to a stumbling, defeated mess. Sophia finally looked at me, tears shining like broken glass in her eyes. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered, voice trembling with pain I knew all too well. I didn't have an answer, not yet, but I knew this was more than just revenge. This was reclaiming our power. Two women who refused to be hidden or hurt anymore. The diners around us had no idea what storm was raging beneath the calm surface of our dinner. Some stared, others whispered, but none dared intervene. Because betrayal, when it finally reveals itself, is a force too raw and dangerous to ignore. By the end of the night, Sophia and I were no longer strangers or rivals. We were reluctant allies, united by the man who thought he could control both our lives. I saw in her eyes a flicker of hope, maybe even strength, the first seeds of healing. As Ethan slunk away, humiliated and exposed, I felt a surge of something fierce and freeing. The chains of lies were breaking, and though the road ahead was still long and uncertain, I knew one thing: I wasn't just surviving, I was rising. If you're wondering how this all began, let me take you back to where it started. But this night, this moment, was the turning point. The moment where silence shattered and the truth took center stage. The moment when the law becomes my weapon and justice tastes like sweet, satisfying revenge. The courtroom smelled of cold steel and silent battles. I sat there calm on the outside, but inside, a tempest of emotions raged: anger, betrayal, and a fierce determination to rewrite my story. For years, Ethan had lived a double life, spinning lies that wove around me like chains. But now, with Daniel by my side, the truth was ready to break free, and this time, it would not be ignored. Daniel's steady gaze met mine across the room. He was more than a lawyer. He was my anchor, my silent strength when my own faltered. Together, we had sifted through the wreckage Ethan left behind: hidden accounts, fraudulent transactions, secret properties. Every piece was a nail in his carefully crafted coffin. It wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my dignity and exposing his betrayal in the harshest light. As the judge called the session to order, I felt a surge of power. This was my battlefield now. I listened as Daniel dismantled Ethan's lies, presenting evidence that left no room for doubt. I watched Ethan's mask slip, his arrogance replaced by desperation. Every lie he uttered bounced back to him like a boomerang, and the courtroom was silent except for the sound of truth echoing loud and clear. My heart ached for Sophia and Noah, caught in the crossfire of Ethan's deception. But in that moment, I promised myself I would fight not just for me, but for them too. I made sure Sophia was included in the settlement, securing support for Noah so they wouldn't be left in the shadows like I had been. It wasn't charity. It was justice. The karma Ethan desperately deserved. The judge's verdict was more than I hoped for. The house, the business shares, the alimony, everything was finally mine. But the real victory was watching Ethan stripped of his control, his power crumbling under the weight of his own deceit. The man who thought he could manipulate everyone around him was now facing the consequences he tried so hard to avoid. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt lighter, freer. The chains of betrayal had been broken, replaced with something stronger. The unyielding strength of a woman who refused to be a victim. The silence that once suffocated me was now filled with a fierce roar of empowerment and justice. The emotional crescendo of this story, where every betrayal, every silent tear, and every plan for revenge comes crashing down in a powerful, unforgettable finale. The day Ethan was supposed to celebrate another year of his life, I wrapped a box that carried more weight than any birthday gift should. It wasn't wrapped in glitter or ribbons. Instead, it was sealed with a promise, a silent message to the man who thought he could control and break me. The room was quiet, the air thick with anticipation as I sent the package his way. Inside was a framed photo, a captured moment of strength and truth. It was a picture of Sophia, Noah, and me standing side by side, smiling. The smiles weren't of happiness, but of solidarity, of women who refused to be pitted against each other, who found power in unity where he saw division. The note I left was simple, but sharp enough to cut through years of lies. We found each other. We don't need you anymore. Watching Ethan open it, I saw the shock ripple across his face. His perfect mask faltered, and for once he was stripped bare, vulnerable, powerless. That single moment, frozen in time, was worth more than any courtroom victory or stolen fortune. It was poetic justice, the ultimate revenge that wasn't about ruin, but revelation. I thought about Noah too, the innocent child caught in the crossfire. He deserved peace, and that's what I vowed to give him, far from Ethan's shadows. Sophia and I had built a fragile truce, a new family formed not by blood alone, but by the shared pain of betrayal and the fierce bond of healing. The silence that followed was deafening, but this time it wasn't painful. It was the silence of closure, of a chapter ending and a new one beginning. I realized that revenge isn't just about punishment. It's about reclaiming your life, your joy, your dignity. The ending. This gift is the final word in a story of heartbreak, betrayal, and the quiet power of redemption. Because sometimes the greatest revenge is simply walking away stronger. Thank you for walking this painful, twisted path with me. Betrayal cuts deep, but sometimes it sparks a fire stronger than any heartbreak. Remember, true revenge isn't just about breaking others. It's about rising above, reclaiming your power, and rewriting your story. If Lisa's journey moved you, share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. This isn't just a story, it's a testament to the strength that comes from the darkest betrayals. Stay tuned, because in the world of ultimate revenge, the next story is always waiting.